Hey everybody, Dr. Jesse Morris here. Hey, today I want to teach you how to release your psoas muscles with a lacrosse ball. If you're watching this video, you've probably heard of the psoas, but if you haven't, the psoas muscle is a big fat muscle that runs down the front of your spine on each side and hooks into your inner thighs. You can think of your psoas kind of like a big cable. There's two of them, and they run down the fronts of your spine on each side, and they're big muscles. They're about the diameter of your wrist, and so when they're contracting and not moving correctly, they can really contribute to a dysfunction in your low back, so the low back loses its proper range of motion, and they can also contribute to low back pain because they're just a big kind of key player in contracting the low back. So it's a pretty common muscle that I will work on when people have low back pain. It tends to be pretty helpful, but being able to release it at home and work on it yourself is also a super helpful thing. So in order to do the release that I'm going to teach you today, you're going to need a lacrosse ball and a yoga block. If you don't have a lacrosse ball, you can use a tennis ball. It just doesn't work quite as well. And if you don't have a yoga block, you can use like a thick book, and that can totally do the trick. So if you need to pause the video and grab yourself a ball and a block or a ball and a book, go ahead and do that now, and then we'll get into it. All right, so let's check out this release. So what I want you to do, you're gonna take your block and you're just gonna put it down onto the floor, okay? We have the block so it elevates the ball a little bit. It gives us a little bit better access to get the ball onto the psoas muscle where we want it to be. And the trick to this is really putting the ball in the right place, okay? So what you wanna do is you wanna find the pointy part of your hip. So you have your hip bones, so like the pointy, bony part of your hip that kind of sticks out the furthest in the front. You want to find that point, and then you're going to take the ball and you're going to nestle it right inside of that hip point. So when you go down onto the block, you don't want the ball pressing onto the bone. You want it kind of settled into the soft tissue just inside the pointy part of your hip. So it's a little hard to hold the ball in place and get down onto the block because you kind of need both hands. So really the way to do this is take the ball, set it down on the block, and then you're gonna aim for the pointy part of your hip, or just inside the pointy part of your hip, to come down onto the block. So that looks like this. What I do is I come down, I basically hold the ball, find that pointy part of my hip, and then just kind of settle the ball right inside that in what's called your pelvic bowl. So once you have a little pressure onto the ball, the first step to this is to just let your body weight kind of settle down onto the ball. It can be tender in there for sure. And so sometimes just allowing your body weight to settle down onto the block is enough to get that muscle to release and create a little more space and a little relief in there. So I want to teach you a couple of other ways to make it a little more dynamic so you can work with this instead of just laying on the ball. So first step, like I said, is really just kind of settling down onto the ball. Sometimes this is enough. If you want to make it more dynamic and if you want to add some motion into it, a couple of different options are: one, just bending and straightening your knee. So that just changes the tension on all the muscles around your leg and your hip, and that can be a really helpful. I take it kind of slow, bending it up, bending it down. It can be helpful just to add a little dynamism to getting that muscle to expand and contract. Another great way to go is bending the knee up to about 90 degrees and then taking the ankle of that knee and putting it out and then back in. And what this motion does is does a cross friction, so the ball is kind of moving across the fibers of the psoas. Can also be a helpful way to just get a little bit of a deeper release there. And so you can move the ankle back and forth. And then the third option that I want to teach you is tucking the toes under, straightening the leg all the way. So if you engage your glute and you fire your glute muscle by straightening your leg all the way, neurologically you inhibit or turn off the psoas muscle. So what I like to do here is tuck the toes under, straighten the leg all the way, really squeeze the glute muscle, and then hold that for 3 to 5 seconds, let the knee come back down, let everything relax, settle down onto the ball, and sometimes you can get a little bit of a deeper release there. And you can do that with some repetitions. So you can squeeze and come on down and relax. And so those are three ways to make the psoas release a little more dynamic. And so once again, you can just settle down onto the block, onto the ball, let your body weight rest. Sometimes that's enough. If you feel like you want to make it a little more dynamic and get a little bit of a deeper release, you can just straighten and bend your knee. You can bend your knee up to 90 degrees and take your ankle left to right, put some cross friction in, or you can straighten your whole leg, fire the glute to try to inhibit the psoas, and then hold that for 3 to 5 seconds, drop down onto the block and release a little deeper and do repetitions of those. I'd encourage you to experiment with trying both sides. You know, sometimes one side's much more contracted, we need to just work that, but oftentimes doing both can be helpful just to create more space and a more balanced kind of stimulus into the low back. So I hope this is helpful. If you have low back pain, if it's really acute, you want to be pretty careful with this, but if you have kind of chronic, ongoing low back pain, this can be a really helpful way to increase the range of motion and create more blood flow and more space in the low back. Like I said, I hope this is helpful for you. As always, feel free to share this with your friends and family, and I look forward to seeing you soon.